Good afternoon. I'm J. Lenora Bressler, and welcome to the April 29, 2019 edition of the Bible Delight in the Details. Be careful. Be very, very careful what you ask for, because you may not know what you're asking for. This is exactly what Jesus told John and James, and also their mother, when right before the crucifixion, during that last week, they came to Jesus within hearing distance of the other disciples and asked him, and even got their mother into the act to ask on their behalf that they be allowed to be on the right and left of Jesus. Now, this shows us so much. As we talked about yesterday, the crucifixion really is a mimicking, if you will, of the coronation of a emperor in the Roman times. Remember, it had been hundreds of years before these people had seen the coronation of an Israelite king. And so they maybe were not familiar with some of the traditions as easily as everyone would have known the traditions associated with the Roman emperors, because that was still going on. And one of the things that would happen is that as the coronation moment came, when the emperor would be declared to be king and God, he would mount up, be raised up literally on the steps of a temple, turn to the crowd, and be announced. And to his right and to his left were two very high officials, people that were very well known politically, both who could testify to the correctness of what he was claiming, and also would be, by implication, very involved in his administration. Excuse me. Now, what's fascinating is that John and James, as well as Peter, had been sort of set apart, it seemed. They were a little different than the rest of the 12 disciples. After all, it was John, James, and Peter that actually saw the transfiguration on the mountain, where Moses and Elijah appeared, and where God, the Father's voice, came out declaring that Jesus was indeed his beloved Son. Listen to him. It had been them that could have testified to that. So it sort of, in a way, makes sense that they might have felt that as they were going to Jerusalem, if indeed this was the time that Jesus was going to be made into the earthly king, the political authority that people thought the Messiah was going to be, they would be in the prime position to say, yes, we saw this, we were there, we heard God the Father speak, we saw Moses, we saw Elijah. And yet they didn't know what they were asking. It's interesting that there was a third person who could have thought that he might be standing there when Jesus came into his authority, and that was Peter, because he, like James and John, were part of that inner sanctum, that special group of three. And yet, we don't have an indication that he was demanding that. We also have a very interesting statement from Peter in a letter that he would later write, years later, in 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 6. He says this: "Humble yourselves under God's mighty hand, that he may lift you up in due time." I have a feeling he remembered what had happened to James and John when they got a little bit big for their britches, and when, in their ignorance, they wanted to claim a political authority that was not in the offing. And they even brought their mother into it. Jesus said, "You don't know what you're asking." That's literally what he said to them. You do not know what you are asking. Fascinatingly, we know from Matthew and Mark that their mother, yes, the mother that had asked Jesus to have her children on his right and his left when he came into his glory, was at the foot of the cross. I wonder, as she looked up at Christ and saw two men, one on his right, one on his left, on crosses, whether she remembered what she had asked for. Be careful what you ask for. God knows how to raise you to the appropriate place of honor, of authority, of opportunity in due time. When we think we know, and when we are rather demanding of it, we often don't know what we're asking for. I'm J. Lenora Bressler, reminding you, put your life, including your ambitions, in God's hands, for He knows what you should be asking for. Visit me on the next edition of the Bible. Delight in the details. Have a great evening.